Keynote for the 2024 Cultural Diplomacy Conference, and congratulations to all of our student delegates who are participating in Junior Model United Nations this year. We held this event in partnership with the Penn Museum, and we thank them for their partnership and collaboration on this event. And we're really excited to run through this presentation with you to tell you all about culture, about diplomacy, and some of your next steps in being a Junior Model United Nations delegate. So let's get started. So this is our education team at the World Affairs Council. My name is Kate Whitman-Kamara. I'm the Director of Education for Middle School Programs, and I have the privilege of running all things related to Junior Model United Nations. We also have our Manager of Education, Rachel Warner, Dave Kippett, who is our School Outreach Consultant, Jeff Quinn, our Director of Education for High School Programs, and Kristen Hutchinson, our Vice President of Education, who oversees all of our education programs at the World Affairs Council. So our big question for today is, what is culture? And this is really, really important for you to understand as United Nations delegates. That's what you'll be role playing at Model UN. You have to understand the culture of your country. So what does that mean? Well, culture is a way of life that's shared by a group of people. So culture is not something that we just have on our own. We usually share it perhaps with our family, our school, our country. And examples of culture are things like food, language, beliefs, or traditions. Our next question for you is, what is diplomacy? Maybe you've heard our Model United Nations program referred to as our Student Diplomat Program, because you all are going to be role-playing as delegates and diplomats. So what exactly is diplomacy? Diplomacy is the act of solving problems and building relationships between people and also between countries, which is what you are charged with as Model UN delegates. So let's tie those two definitions together. What is cultural diplomacy, and why might we be learning about it at our first Model UN conference? And cultural diplomacy is the act of building relationships by understanding another group's way of life, that shared way of life that we talked about earlier. And of course, it's important for all of you to understand this as Model UN delegates, because in order for you to come up with solutions with other countries, you have to understand your own country's culture and the cultures of the other countries that you'll be working with. So we have a little quiz here, and I know that you all are watching this as a recording. So try to guess in your head where you think these different places might be. And question number one is kind of an easy one, which is, where in the world do people throw their caps at graduation ceremonies? Where do you think this happens? Take a second. And if you guess the United States, you are correct. This is a tradition that actually started in the early 20th century at the US Naval Academy. But this is part of our culture that has traveled around the world. Many different countries now throw their caps at graduation, but it started here in the United States. Let's see another one. Where in the world does a human tower building competition take place? Does anybody know where that might be? Take a minute and think about it. Think about your guess, and let's see. So this tradition takes place in Catalonia, Spain, and this is very cool because it's something that they've done for hundreds of years. They do it every year, right? It's annual. And this tradition showcases their value for community, teamwork, and togetherness. That's why they work together to build that human tower. And I have one last one for you. Where in the world do people practice Tai Chi in parks and other public spaces? And a clue is that this could actually have more than one correct answer. So take a moment, think about what your answer might be, and let's see. So we have China listed here. Tai Chi originated in China. It combines physical activity with mindfulness. However, you could have even said Philadelphia for this answer or New York City, and you would have been correct because, as we mentioned earlier, culture moves. And so people all over the world actually do practice Tai Chi in parks and other public spaces, including right here in our own city. So I wanted to tell you all about my experiences with new cultures because part of why I work at the World Affairs Council is because I love learning about other cultures, other places. I love to travel. And this is a picture of me in Sierra Leone. And you can see where Sierra Leone is here. I like to say it's kind of on the elbow of Africa, right by the coast. And take a look at what I'm wearing and also what I'm doing in this photo. So I'm wearing something called a lapa. This was a gift that was given to me. If you were to see me here in the US, maybe I'm often wearing a pair of slacks when I go to work, but this is the traditional piece of clothing that women wear in Sierra Leone. So as a cultural diplomat, when I'm there, I really like to dress similarly to how other people are dressing. And this was a gift to me. So of course, as a cultural diplomat, I was going to wear my lapa with all of these bright, beautiful colors that are very important in Sierra Leonean culture. Now, if you look at what I'm doing here, often students will guess that maybe I'm churning butter, and it looks a lot like that, but I'm actually beating peppers and onions together with that really, really big stick. This is the base of all the traditional food in Sierra Leone. Almost all of it has a base of onion and Scotch bonnet pepper. And so again, as a cultural diplomat, I wanted to eat the food that people were eating and cook the way that they were cooking. People tend to not have things like a food processor that's just going to chop up the onions and the peppers. They go through that process of making it with their hands. And so those were a couple of the things that I made sure I did when I was in Sierra Leone to make sure that I learned the culture and really acted as a diplomat. So what is culture? We did a quick definition earlier, but there are some other parts of it too. So culture is a combination of beliefs, values, and traditions. So it's the way that we think, and then also the things that we do that are passed down to us by family. So an example is that a lot of families in the United States might have a tradition of having Thanksgiving dinner. What's served at the dinner can be really, really different because we all have different food traditions handed down by our families. Culture also affects the way that we act and think. One example that I think is a really great one is that in the United States, we tend to shake hands as a greeting. That's part of our culture. We don't even think about it because we do it so often, but in other cultures, people might bow, people might kiss on the cheek. So culture influences the way that we act. And again, culture is learned and shared by groups of people. None of us are born knowing what our culture is. It has to be taught to us by somebody older, usually our family, but also other important people in our lives. Culture is also unconscious. So think back to the example of shaking hands. When I meet a new person, I just automatically hold out my hand to shake their hand. I do not even think about doing it because it is so much a part of my culture that I just do it automatically. We also all belong to many different cultures. You belong to a national culture, your family culture, your school culture, your city culture, and maybe perhaps a religious or ethnic culture as well. We all belong to many, many different cultures. So our next part of this presentation is our Everyone Has a Culture worksheet, which maybe your teacher gave to you. If you and your classmates have this worksheet, I would encourage you to pause this point of the presentation and share some of your answers with the person sitting next to you. And maybe you think that you just have a ton of things in common with people in your class, but I bet that you'll find that you also have differences too. So take a few moments, pause the presentation, and talk with someone sitting near you about your answers on this worksheet and try to find what is similar and what is different. The next part of our presentation is the cultural iceberg. So if you think about an iceberg, and you can see here in the picture, we only see a tiny, tiny part of it that's above the water. And most of an iceberg is underneath the water, and we cannot see it. Culture acts very much in the same way. When we meet someone, there are parts of their culture that we can see right away. But most of someone's culture is something that we have to really get to know them in order to know what it is, right? In order to know what they believe, what their traditions are. All of that is underneath the surface. I can't know that just by looking at you. I have to get to know you. So take a moment and brainstorm. What parts of culture do you think we can see? And what parts of culture do you think we can't see right away? What do you need to get to know someone before you know part of their culture? So here are some examples, and perhaps you paused and talked about this with your class. Some parts of culture that we can see, things like clothes. We can see what someone's wearing. We can see how they act, right? Whether they go to shake your hand or give you a bow. We can hear the language that they speak. But look at how much we can't know about someone's culture just by looking at them. We don't know what their favorite foods are. We don't know what the music is from their culture. We don't know how they think about roles in their family or their religion. And we don't know their personal beliefs or how they view the world. And these are actually the most important parts of culture. And that's why it's so important to really take the time to get to know somebody's culture. So this next activity, and you can pause the video at different points if you are watching this and take a few guesses, but we're going to ask you to look beneath the iceberg of these different actions and think about what these different cultures view as important. So our first example is in West Africa, groups of people all eat food from the same dish. So if people are all eating food from the same dish, what would West Africans view as important? And there are a few different answers to this one. If you said sharing, you are correct. If you said community, you are also correct. West African culture is very community oriented. And so children are taught from a young age how to eat from the same plate as someone else and how to look at the plate and know what is theirs and what should be left for somebody else. Sharing is very important in this culture. In Indonesia, the first day of school is spent getting to know other students, no academics, only making friends. So what do you think people in Indonesia view as important? And again, there are a few different answers you could give for this. If you said friendship is important, you are correct. If you said community is important, you are correct. In Indonesia, they really, really value their social relationships, and that's why they dedicate the first day of school just for students getting to know each other. Our next example, in Japan, students actually take off their outside shoes before going to school. So what do you think students in Japan might view as important? And if you said cleanliness, you would be correct. If you said taking responsibility and taking care of a space, you would be correct. In Japan, it's really, really important for people to keep a tidy space. And actually, this is a fun fact that I think is really interesting. In Japan, it's also very common for students to take the last few minutes of the school day and help to tidy up the school building. Our next one is in Finland. Students play outside for 15 minutes every hour. And I think it's about 75 minutes per day that they get outside altogether. So what do you think people in Finland might view as important? And again, there are a couple of different answers. In Finland, people really believe that children learn through play. So play is viewed as important, but also nature is viewed as very important. And they make sure that their students get time in nature as part of their school day. So this photo is a wonderful example of cultural diplomacy. It's probably very different from what many of you are used to seeing. So what do you think might be happening in this photo? I invite you to pause and take a few guesses as a class. And who are these people? I also invite you to pause and take a few guesses. Some of you might know the woman on the left. And I'll give you some answers to these first two questions before we get to our last one. So of course, you all see in this photo that we have two people who are touching noses. And this woman on the left is Kate Middleton. That's Princess Kate. She's part of the royal family in England. And the person on the right is actually a Maori person from New Zealand. The Maori people are the indigenous people of New Zealand. So this photo represents cultural diplomacy because Princess Kate would usually not greet someone in this way. She's probably more used to people bowing to her, and before she became a princess, maybe shaking hands. But Princess Kate has to be a cultural diplomat because she goes to places all over the world. And this Maori greeting is very important because the legend of the Maori creation story is that when the creator of the universe made humans, he literally breathed life into them. And so when you greet someone, you touch noses, you're breathing life into that person. So Princess Kate must have done her research and really understood this about the Maori culture. And she was prepared to rub noses with the Maori people who she met. It's a wonderful example of cultural diplomacy. So there are a few different ways to be a diplomat. You all will be role-playing formal diplomats in Model UN. And formal diplomats do a few different things. They represent their country around the world, and they build relationships between countries. Remember, we talked about that's the act of diplomacy, is building relationships. And they also solve problems between countries. So in this photo, this woman right here is Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is the US ambassador to the United Nations. And in this photo, she is in the Horn of Africa, and she's talking with a little girl who's a refugee who's hoping to be resettled in the United States. So she's doing exactly what we expect formal diplomats to do. She's traveling somewhere else, representing the US, and trying to help solve a problem and make sure that people around the world get what they need. There's also everyday diplomacy. You do not need to work for the UN to be a diplomat. And everyday diplomats solve problems, they build relationships, they make an effort to understand others, and they especially do this through learning about different people, culture, and points of view. So each and every one of you can be a diplomat both inside and outside of Model UN. So think about what some important skills are that a diplomat needs to have. And again, I invite you to pause the video and talk with your classmates about what you think these skills might be. And we have a first one here, which is language skills. So if you're going to a country that speaks a different language, it will really, really help you to learn that language, of course, so that you can understand people. It's also important to have patience. Solving problems and understanding different cultures can be hard, and it takes time, so you have to be patient. Diplomats also need conflict resolution skills. That's a huge part of Model UN. You are solving global problems. You need to have conflict resolution because other delegates might see the issue differently than you do. It's also important to be a problem solver. The whole goal of Model UN is that you're coming up with solutions to your problems. It's also important to have cultural understanding, right? Because that's the way that you're going to connect with people from other places and from other cultures. And finally, good communication skills. Now, this doesn't just mean that you're a good talker, it also means that you're a good listener, because that is essential to conflict resolution and to understanding others. So where can we find diplomacy and diplomats? Let's see some examples. I invite you to pause and brainstorm with your class, and we'll see how many you come up with. We can find diplomats at school or at home. Your teachers are wonderful examples. They solve problems between students every single day. That is an example of diplomacy. We also find diplomats in governments, right? In the US government and governments all over the world. And finally, we find diplomats at international organizations like the UN. And this is a picture of the United Nations right here in New York City. So a little bit of background on the United Nations, and you all are in the Model United Nations program. So let's talk about what the UN is and what it does. It was founded in 1945, right after World War II, because the founders were horrified by what happened during the Second World War. And they thought to themselves that if they created an organization where countries around the world could come together and solve problems, we could avoid a third world war. So its main goals are, number one, to work for world peace. Number two, protect human rights, make sure that everyone has what they need to live a good life. And number three, help countries work together to solve these global problems instead of resorting to war. So what is your role as a Model UN student diplomat? So the first thing you need to know is that you are role-playing the UN General Assembly. This is where all the countries of the United Nations come together to propose solutions to global problems. You are going to represent your assigned country as a diplomat. So you can see here, these students represented Haiti, and they're actually wearing diplomat badges with the Haitian flag to show that they are the diplomats from Haiti. You're going to use all of your wonderful diplomacy skills to debate different ideas and find solutions to your assigned topic. And if you do an excellent job, you might win an award for being an outstanding delegate, or writing a wonderful position paper, or recording an excellent opening speech video. And we will be going into all of those assignments in just a little bit. So here are some of your next steps as Model UN delegates and diplomats. Your first step is to research your country and your assigned topic with your partner. You never work alone in Model UN. You have one or two other students who are in your same committee. They are representing the same country and studying the same topic. So you're going to become an expert on your country as well as your topic. And you're going to read the briefing paper about your topic and answer some of the questions there. And those briefing papers are going to be available on our website by February 16th. And your assigned country and topic, in case you don't know it already, just ask your teacher because they have it in their Model UN Google Drive. Step number two is you're going to attend our Junior Model United Nations Preparatory Conference, or PrEP Conference, as we like to call it. This is exactly what it sounds like. We will prepare you for Model UN and everything that you need to know. You're going to learn more about your assigned topic and meet an expert in the field. You're going to practice something called parliamentary procedure. And this is basically the set of rules that people use to speak at the UN. You're going to practice speaking like a diplomat. You're also going to practice writing resolutions. Those are the documents that are used at the UN to propose solutions, and you all are going to be writing one. You're also going to practice all of those diplomacy and public speaking skills with delegates from other schools. And remember to wear your diplomat badge right here, and your teacher is going to help you to make these badges. The next step is that everyone, all delegates, are going to write a resolution. Remember, this is what they use at the UN to solve problems, and so it's a really important part of the program. With your partner or partners, you are going to write a resolution about your assigned topic or global problem, and you're going to propose 3 solutions that your country supports. Those are due by Friday, April 12th. And again, your teacher will upload them to the Model United Nations Google Drive. The next step is one that not all of our delegates will do, and ask your teacher if your school is doing this assignment. You might be writing a position paper. A position paper is a 1 or 2 page paper about your country and its history, why your assigned topic matters to your country, and what your country thinks the UN should do. So there's some similarities between this and your resolution. It's sort of like a persuasive essay. And this assignment is due on Friday, April 19th. And just like the resolutions, your teacher will upload them for you into Google Drive. And then your last assignment, and this is also optional, so some schools do this and some schools don't, you might record a short opening speech video. Your video is a lot like your paper. You're going to be talking about why your assigned topic matters to your country and what your country thinks the UN should do. You do not need to talk about your country's history. You should really just be putting forward solutions and talking about why this issue is so important to your country. And this is also due on Friday, April 19th. Your teacher will also upload your video into Google Drive. And finally, the last step is that you attend the Junior Model United Nations Final Conference at Temple University. And we have 3 different dates. Your school will be attending one of these days, May 14th, 15th, or 16th. If you don't know the day that you're attending the conference, just ask your teacher and they will tell you. So that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions at all, please let your teacher know and they can get in touch with me. Again, my name is Kate Whitman-Kamara. I'm the Director of Education for Middle School Programs. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. Congratulations on being part of our 2024 group of Model UN delegates, and we can't wait to see you in March.